Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. When it comes to the world of Street Fighter, countless memorable characters have surfaced throughout the franchise's rich history. Today we are going to highlight one of many of these fine specimens when we look back at the history of Cammy, one of the most popular female fighters in the series' entire lifespan. Cammy's mass appeal means that she will forever remain a fighting game favourite for many. So within this video we are going to go back and look at every major appearance this high-end heroine has made throughout her storied fighting game career. And we're going to look at how all of this fits together in her overall story. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the mad story of Cammy. Yeah! After a huge success of Street Fighter 2 and several reiterations of the game, by 1993 Capcom were ready to refine the game even further, which would result in the release of Super Street Fighter 2 in 1993. The game would be the first developed to run on Capcom's new arcade CP System 2 hardware, which permitted more sophisticated graphics and audio over the original. The most exciting inclusion of all in Super Street Fighter 2 was of course the 4 new characters who were added to the game's roster, which is where Cammy would surface for the first time ever as one of the new challengers. According to Noritaka Funamizu, Capcom's research and development head at the time, he states that Cammy's inclusion in Super Street Fighter 2 was a result of him feeling that the franchise needed more female characters rather than just Chun-Li. Like Chun-Li before her, she would be designed to utilise speed, unlike many male roster members who would rely on brute strength. Cammy was given a western look with her sporting blonde hair, blue eyes and a scar under her left cheek. Like Chun-Li though, her level of sex appeal was ramped up, which was achieved by designers depicting her wearing a green sleeveless thong leotard, a military red beret, red gloves, black boots and green camouflage stains on her legs. In her maiden appearance, the character who went by the full name of Cammy White was said to be a deadly assassin who had previously worked for Shadaloo. Shortly prior to the events of Super Street Fighter 2, Cammy would awaken with amnesia and be taken in by a group known as Delta Red, a special force with headquarters set in the United Kingdom. Although she had no knowledge of her past, she retained all of her fighting capabilities. When the next World Warrior tournament was announced, Cammy felt a strange connection to M. Bison, so entered the competition to try and learn more. In the events of Super Street Fighter 2, she would confront Bison, where he would tell her that he was the one responsible for planting her in Delta Red in the first place, but did not foresee her losing her memory, so had no further use for her. Once Bison is defeated, Delta Red keep Cammy on, with her teammates encouraging her to continue to live her new life. In this game, along with future appearances, mechanically Cammy features as a quick, close-range fighter, which means to gain an advantage she often hurls herself at opponents relying on speed and priority. Her biggest chink in her armour in the early days was her ability to evade projectile attacks, however she would improve in this area as the series progressed. Personality-wise, Cammy will become well known for her strong, forceful and determined nature. However, on top of this, her strong sense of military discipline, honour and drive paired with her warfare mindset makes her a dangerous fighter to contend with. Despite all of this though, away from combat she is reportedly friendly, respectful and enthusiastic towards those she cares about. Just 1 year after the release of Super Street Fighter 2, a live-action Street Fighter movie would hit theatres. The film would be a huge commercial success, with a worldwide box office turning over 3 times its production costs. In this bizarre movie, Shadaloo is depicted as a southeastern country, where a war is taking place between M. Bison, a drug lord turned general, against allied nations led by Guile. Cammy in the movie features in the role of Guile's assistant, Sergeant Cammy White, but perhaps more memorable than the actual story of the movie itself, Cammy was portrayed by none other than Kylie Bloody Minogue, a woman who is considered a top-level pop star in many countries around the world. However, if you are really old school, you most likely remember her as Charlene from the Australian soap opera Neighbours. Cammy over the years would make a number of movie and television appearances, but in today's instances we're going to focus more on the games. Speaking of games, we of course had the Street Fighter the movie games, which were the gaming counterparts to the live action movie. These games, like the Mortal Kombat series, represented combat via the usage of digitised actors. Cammy's appearance in these was notable for showing Kylie Minogue dressed in the same leggy, arsey attire that Cammy wears in Super Street Fighter 2. Although it is of note that many of the moves in the game were instead performed by Kylie's stunt double, Emma Kearney. Next, in gaming, Cammy would resurface twice in 1996. Firstly as a playable fighter in the crazy crossover fighting game known as X-Men vs Street Fighter, then her same sprite would appear in Street Fighter Alpha 2 Gold, an enhanced version of Alpha 2. Since the Alpha series is timeline-wise a prequel to the events of Street Fighter 2 games, the games are set when Cammy is still part of Shadaloo, working for M. Bison. In these games, she is depicted wearing a light blue thong leotard that has a small yellow tie attached to the front of her turtleneck, a small blue garrison cap, knee-high brown boots and red gauntlets similar to her classic incarnation. To illustrate the place in time further, her winning pose even sees her saluting M. Bison. Due to only being added as a playable fighter in the gold version of Alpha 2, sadly her appearance does not fit into Alpha 2's story canon. However, more about her past will be outlined in Alpha 3. In the game, she is depicted as a soulless doll sent to assassinate Dao Sim. However, he is successful in using his spiritual powers to give her self-awareness. Coming to the realisation that Shadaloo were controlling her, Bison sends Vega to observe Cammy. Vega eventually confronts her, informing her she is an experiment that is no longer needed, but ultimately lets her live after having a fight where he admits underestimating her. She later encounters Julie and Junie, two other Shadaloo dolls, who lack the benefit of self-awareness. Eventually confronting Bison himself, he informs her that she exists solely to become his next body, after his current physical manifestation has been destroyed by his psycho power. During this confrontation with Bison, Cammy manages to break the other dolls free from Shadaloo's mind control. During this escapade, Bison reveals she is actually a clone of himself, who even possesses a portion of psycho power herself, and if he dies, she dies as well. During this confrontation, Cammy fights gallantly against Bison's psychic probing and control over her, but while trying to escape, she unfortunately falls unconscious. While unconscious, Vega manages to rescue her from the base before it is destroyed, leaving her on Delta Red's doorstep, setting up the events of Super Street Fighter 2 and bringing good cohesion to the story. In the years that followed, Cammy would continue to make appearances as a playable fighter in non-Street Fighter canon games, such as Marvel vs Capcom 2, Capcom vs SNK and Capcom vs SNK 2. But aside from this, while she was not a playable character in any of the Street Fighter 3 games, she makes appearances in certain endings in Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, a game that story-wise takes place after Street Fighter 2, making these appearances her latest appearances in the Street Fighter timeline. Bizarrely, in these endings, she wears the same attire as in Street Fighter Alpha 3, even though the events of Street Fighter 3 unfolded years later. This indicates she is dressed like this as either a joke played on gamers, a mistake being placed in the game, or most likely of all I guess to replicate her appearances in all of the other Capcom crossover games that all reuse the Alpha 2 Gold / X-Men vs Street Fighter sprite. In a more quirky appearance, Cammy would appear in Cannon Spike for the Dreamcast in the year 2000, a bizarre multi-directional shooter that plays similar to the likes of Smash TV, although with a primary focus on boss fighting. Not only is Cammy featured in this game as a playable character, among other Capcom offerings, but more impressively than that, the game is named after one of her trademark attacks, obviously known as the Cannon Spike, which is proof of how valuable Cammy became to Capcom over the years. Both of her Shadaloo and Delta Red costumes are available in the game. While the Street Fighter franchise itself would lay dormant for a number of years, in the late noughties it would return with Street Fighter 4, a game story-wise ridiculously set halfway between Street Fighter 2 and 3. Cammy herself would not surface until the second iteration of the game, known as Super Street Fighter 4. In the game's story, fellow Delta Red member Colonel Wolfman informs Cammy that a mysterious group known as Sin has built a dam in India, cutting off the water supply to her old friend Dao Sim's village. Surveillance photos soon reveal that the Sin operatives in the area are shockingly bearing the Shadaloo's insignia. In the Super Street Fighter 4 original video animation, Seth, the leader of Sin, sends Jury to capture Shadaloo dolls Junie and Julie. Juri is a brutal South Korean taekwondo martial artist who derives pleasure from inflicting pain on others. Cammy and Guile arrive on the scene just after Juri has left the dolls unconscious. Despite Cammy's efforts to warn Guile of an incoming attack, he is unable to dodge Juri's fierce attacks and is too defeated. Despite her best efforts, Cammy is overwhelmed by Juri as well, but later enters the Sin tournament to get revenge on Juri on behalf of the dolls she considers her sisters. In the tournament, she defeats Juri. Junie eventually wakes up from her coma, and the game ends with Cammy promising to help her recover. Cammy would also go on to appear in Street Fighter V, which story-wise occurs after 4 but before 3. The story of the game features Shadaloo initiating Operation Chains, which consists of launching 7 artificial satellites into orbit known as the Black Moons, planning to spread fear and despair, the source of Bison's psycho power, and siphon this energy in order to render him and his forces invincible. During the game, warriors travel the world searching for pieces that control these Black Moons, and during this war for control, Cammy defeats and restrains her sister, the Capri, who has been brainwashed by the Shadaloo. Speaking of the Capri, she has already previously surfaced as a playable fighter in Ultra Street Fighter 4, and before that in Julie and Junie's introduction in Street Fighter Alpha 3. Her appearance in Ultra 4 though is more important here, as she is revealed to be an imperfect product of Shadaloo's cloning experiments that would eventually result in Cammy's actual creation. She has a strong resemblance to Cammy but speaks with a strong Russian accent. Knowing of her brainwashing, Cammy refuses to surrender her to the police, even receiving Juri's help along the way. After enough warriors have gathered enough pieces to deactivate the moons, together they storm the Shadaloo base. During this final encounter against Shadaloo, to Cammy's shock she finds that all of the other dolls have come under the control of Fang, a Shadaloo member introduced in Street Fighter V. She ends up fighting and eventually defeating Julie. Vega ends up taking on Cammy next, defeating her, but she is saved by the Capri, who blocks his claw. Suddenly Juri arrives, almost crashing her motorbike into the group. Juri challenges Vega with Cammy glancing at the Capri, wondering why she had saved her. Juri is truthful in claiming that the Capri wants to help her, but also is feeling a bit jealous. Vega attacks Juri and the two of them fight. Meanwhile, Cammy and the Capri are surrounded by the remaining dolls, erupting in a big fight. The device that controls the dolls is destroyed during this encounter, and after Cammy and the Capri defeat the other dolls, Cammy notices that the psycho power surrounding them has disappeared. At the end of it all, the sisters are finally reunited. Cammy's story closes with a final scene of Juri and Cammy watching Shadaloo's destruction, bringing the whole affair to an end. Away from the canon over time, Cammy would prove a popular enough Capcom character that she would make countless appearances in many Capcom titles over the years. This would include the terrible Final Fight Streetwise game, where she would appear as a bonus character who appears in the in-game tournament section. She would continue to appear in the Marvel vs. Capcom series, but would surface in Street Fighter Cross Tekken 2. This game even features a story of Cammy teaming up with Chun-Li, working together to stop Shadaloo and the Mishima Zaibatsu from securing Pandora's box. She would also appear in Namco Cross Capcom, a mobile RPG known as Blood Brothers 2, a class leader in Shadowverse, and even a playable character in Power Rangers Legacy Wars. Cammy's appearances are vast and sprawling, with too many to really even count across various forms of media. Her impact in the world of Street Fighter, fighting games, and just video games overall is almost undeniable. Cammy is a character with a memorable look, a timeless appeal, and even an intriguing enough backstory that makes her interesting away from her fantastic look and magnificent moveset. Cammy is one of the true impact players in the world of fighting games, which is why I thought her time in gaming would be worth looking at and celebrating today. I would be more than curious to hear your thoughts on today's episode and what you thought of this video's change of pace. It was certainly a bit different to what I usually put out, so this begs the question of whether or not you would like other character retrospectives from myself. It has been interesting to focus on just one character for a change rather than the overall history of a whole game. So with that said, if you enjoyed this, which character would you like me to spotlight next? If you enjoyed today's content, I have uploaded countless videos on fighting game history for you to go back and enjoy, so make sure you like this video and subscribe to ensure you get to receive my regular uploads. Hitting that notification bell might actually help too. I am fortunate enough to work full time on YouTube, which is in part thanks to the people who back the channel on Patreon. If you want access to my patron only bonus catalogue of videos, why not consider backing the channel on Patreon? In regards to these people, massive shout-outs go out to Sebastian Velez, Carl Johnson, The Murder of Crows, Heo Paulo Lopez, Joseph Razmik, Ben Harrodine, Corey Omar Sr., Capcom vs SNK, BXL Gotham, Rowan Dinch, Evan Border, Philip Manth, Azra Arkai, Keith Ferguson, Joaquin Varela, Michael Cullix, Ego, Jordan Durant, Angel Light 85, Alethea Swanson, Nick Daniels, Princess Zana, Glennie Glenn, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of the Ted, Gary Pinkett, ECU Professor, Kid Anime, Justin Wang, Aaron McNamara, Hermes Gonzalez, Instant Gratification Monkey, Man Shovel, James Bishop, JB, Michael Hall, Wesley Sang-hee, Wayne Kerr, Langston Miller, New, Brian Barry, Sarah Powell, Flaming Renee, Marvin Araliga, Chris Cool, TOG Driver, Adrian Hannington, Bernard NG, Richard Stew, Stewart, James McDonald, Dan Van Dammit, Lewis Viant, John Bates, David Bell, Chris Fisk, Mike Bruno, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Craig Jenkins, Retroverse.com, Casey Wright, Synth Spaces, Zai, Andrew Bazansky, Gunther Hendricks, and all of my other great patrons. I love you all. Yeah. Cheerio.